Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media Webinars. Welcome to today's webinar on ESG commitments in mining and business. We've brought together an excellent panel who will unpack why ESG matters and explore the technologies that can help companies put those commitments into practice. A big thank you to our sponsors, SRK Consulting, Pele Green Energy, the CSIR's National Cleaner Production Centre of South Africa, Standard Bank, Harmony Gold, Growthpoint Properties, and Rand Refinery for their support in making this conversation possible. Before we dive in, just a couple of quick notes on housekeeping. The Q&A box is open at the bottom of your screen. Please pop your questions in there, and our panelists will do their best to cover as many of them as possible. The chat is also open for your comments and insights. Just remember, questions in the Q&A, conversations in the chat. This session is being recorded and you'll receive the link afterwards. We're also streaming live on YouTube and the link will be shared in the chat once it's available. With that, let's get started. Today's conversation will be facilitated by Mark Robertson, a principal in the shared value and impact practice at Genesis Analytics, where he leads the team's work on corporate impact and ESG. Mark is a strategist and financial inclusion practitioner who has worked with a range of companies to facilitate inclusive business and strategy development. Mark will facilitate the discussion with our panel, which consists of Sandhisha Jay Narain, Senior Environmental and Social Specialist at Pele Green Energy, Julie Wells, Business Support Manager at National Cleaner Production Centre, Fiona Sutton, Principal Environmental Scientist at SRK Consulting, Werner van Antwerpen, Head of Corporate Advisory at Growthpoint Properties, Sheena Ramsamy, Manager of Business Ecosystems and Sustainability for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank, and Terence Nkosi, Chief Technical and Sustainability Officer at Rand Refinery. I'll hand over now to Mark, our facilitator, to continue the proceedings. Over to you, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Shannon, and a warm welcome to everyone as well. Lovely to have you here. I see some people have already started introducing themselves and greeting others on the chat. Please feel free to do so. It's great to have you here. We're going to be discussing and trying to understand a bit more about the importance of ESG commitments and some of the technologies that support them. We've got a great panel assembled for today with a wealth of expertise from across a range of sectors. And today we'll look at ESG's role, moving beyond compliance to actively driving innovation, attracting investment, and fostering a more resilient and equitable economy. We'll discuss some opportunities, we'll discuss some challenges, we'll try and understand how integrating ESG into core business strategies works and what to expect in the process of doing that. And throughout, we'll try and unearth some nice practical examples wherever possible. We want to make this something that will be meaningful to you guys in your day-to-day jobs and in your own organizations and sectors. As we go, I'll direct questions at... sorry, was that an unmute? All good. As we go, I'll direct questions at specific individuals from the panel. If any other panelists want to add on, please feel free to do so. If everyone can keep responses nice and pithy, we can cover a lot of ground today. And hopefully we'll get some Q&As. So for the audience members, please do use the Q&A box. If you've got a question for a specific panelist, please name them in the Q&A. That's very helpful. And for the panelists, if there is something that makes sense to answer directly in text in the Q&A, please do so. So that's enough for me. Lovely to see everyone introducing themselves. Thank you. And a nice mix of people from all over, which is great. Let's jump in. We're going to kick things off just by setting the scene a little bit, trying to understand the foundational role of ESG in shaping the future of business, and particularly in South Africa. So Sandhisha, I'm going to start with you. First question to get us going. How do you see ESG commitments shaping investor confidence and capital flows into South Africa's renewable energy sector?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks everybody for joining this webinar. Hope to share some insightful learnings from my experience in the renewable energy sector. I think to your question, Mark, ESG is definitely becoming a decisive filter for investors in South Africa. And core to that and establishing sort of a confidence in investors is to embed into your corporate ethos strong ESG systems and practices, as well as a level of expertise throughout your organization to deliver on those systems. For example, at Pele, what we've done is embedded what we call an environmental social management system, right through from our corporate level down to our project level. The ESMS is the acronym, and this is basically aligned to international best practice and international frameworks together with national legislation. So what that shows lenders is that we're also tapping into understanding of global mega trends and just transitions in terms of policies and how they affect us in the local context. How this translates from a financial materiality perspective, this translates basically to a smoother project process, a lower risk profile, as well as an indication to investors that we're not just complying, but we are also have this ethos of best practice and continual improvement. On the flip side, investors are not just interested in low risk projects. They also want to better understand what your materiality impact is, your transformative impact is. So we also like to show our processes and procedures in terms of cutting emissions, skills development, job security in the communities that we are based in and work with. So I do feel strongly that if organizations can tap into both sides of this equation, you can definitely secure sort of deeper and cheaper funding in terms of capital.
Great. Thanks very much, Sandhisha. I'm going to come to you, Julie. From your perspective at the NCPC, would be great to get your view on this. Are ESG commitments helping to drive South African companies to adopt cleaner production and resource efficiency practices? Are you starting to see some of that activity?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so obviously the E in ESG is what the National Cleaner Production Center is involved in. Cleaner production, by its very nature, is really about the environmental element of this. And we don't have hard evidence, but we certainly have indications that the growth in ESG and the mandate to report has accelerated the uptake of what we call resource efficient and cleaner production. Now, that spans a very broad spectrum of energy efficiency, water management, stewardship, circular economy initiatives, waste reduction and better waste management, chemicals management, etc. And so what we're finding is possibly there's probably three reasons for this. The first one really relates to the return on investment that firms can see when they implement first low cost or no cost options. So when an operations team in any sort of organization, whether they're working in a retail park or a huge industrial firm, when you start to have to monitor energy or water because the ESG requires it, or the ESG reporting requires it, then you've got the freedom and the information to start implementing improvements. Those improvements save money, which then allows the operations team to motivate for more investment and further improvements. The second reason that ESG targets are useful to the implementation of resource efficiency is that normally ESG is communicated to teams. And you come into the office, there's a TV up, it tells you how you're doing as a company, or you look in your company's report, or it's in the newsletter, or the MD writes a memo. And those things drive behavior change. They actually drive adoption. We've even had companies where people say, oh no, people actually go home and they start, changing the way they manage their energy or waste. And finally, this might not be a direct cause and effect relationship, but we have, and there is research that's been undertaken at the moment where ESG reporting requirements and the performance targets, they actually go to the boardroom level. Very often discussions about energy or water or other resources don't make it up to the boardroom, to executive level. But the ESG makes it a little bit more receptive in that boardroom. So more executives are actually supporting operational improvements, because that's what resource efficiency is. That's what the NCPC is involved in, is improving operations. And those operations, they require the funding and the support of top management. We've seen the single biggest barrier to the implementation of resource efficient and cleaner production is lack of management buy-in. So that last sort of intangible is actually very important. So in short, increased monitoring and reporting of those environmental metrics leads to information, and that usually plays a notable and a very positive role in accelerating the adoption of resource efficiency and cleaner production in industrial and commercial sectors. Thanks.
Super. Thanks, Julia. And I think some really nice points that I imagine will come up a few times during today. This idea of aligning incentives, not seeing it just as a compliance burden, but as something that actually leads to this operational efficiency, leads to cost savings. And often, I'm very glad you mentioned on the softer side, the staff and people, I think, often want to believe that they're doing something that is beneficial. They want to work with purpose. And if you can show them ways to do that at work, it then, like you say, also translates into home life. So some lovely points there. Thank you. Van, I'm gonna come to you, and maybe briefly up front, you can chat a little bit about ECO2, talk about how that aligns with broader ESG goals, and in particular, obviously focusing on reducing carbon emissions for businesses operating within Growthpoint's property portfolio. We'd be love to hear your views on that.
Thanks, Mark. I think just a background of Growthpoint and where we actually our journey in the sustainability space. We were one of the founding members of the Green Building Council in South Africa back in 2007. Our property company, as part of COP17 in November 2011, we installed, in association with Eskom and a private EPC, installed the first rooftop solar plant, 44 kilowatt peaks in Durban back in the day. So we have a nice trend with a track record in sustainability. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep innovating. And we launched this ECO2 initiative of ours, and we piggybacked on our power purchase agreement that we signed with Etana back in November 23. And what we did is we actually identified two main issues in the property industry. And it's predominantly relating to the property industry. The one is, how we can assist our tenants to drive their net zero strategy. And the second one is, cost of electricity is becoming too burdensome on our tenants, and the total cost of occupation is just skyrocketing. So on the first one is the strategy to assist our tenants is a real dilemma, because the thing is, what happens, and I'm going to take a simple example. If you have a solar plant on a roof, then the tenant doesn't necessarily know, if that electricity comes from a renewable source or it's from Eskom. And you need to find a way to pass that benefit and that certification that the tenant actually consume a big portion of their electricity as renewable energy. So to give a practical example, say, for example, a mall consumes 100 kilowatt hours and there's no solar or wheeling or nothing associated, then the tenant will, ask 100 kilowatt hours, and we will ask 100 kilowatt hours from Eskom or the council. Say, for example, we have a solar plant and that produces 20 kilowatt hours. The tenant still consumes 100 kilowatt hours, but now the landlord asks only 80 kilowatt hours from the council or Eskom. So if the landlord doesn't step in and assist the tenant in driving there, or find a methodology to assist them to reduce, in essence, their scope 2 emissions, then a tenant in our retail and office and industrial buildings will never be able to drive their strategies. So that said, how do we help our tenants? We found this Eco2 initiative. The one is predominantly focusing on using renewable energy certificates and passing that on to our tenants for them to utilize as a reduction methodology of their scope 2 emissions. And the second one was we found an innovative way to pass some of the benefits that we're receiving from a cost perspective from our power purchase agreement to our tenants in the form of a green benefit credit on their invoice every single month. So those are the two main predominantly factors that we are trying to push through to our tenants with this Eco2 initiative of ours.
Fantastic, Werner, thanks. And I just saw there's a link that's been put in the chat. So if you want to read more about the Eco2 initiative, please have a look there, 3 or 4 lines up. And great to see. I think always nice to see where there's collaboration and solving a problem for your clients, in this case, your tenants, and kind of working together to try and work out what needs to be done and how can we actually efficiently do that. Terence, I'm going to come to you. How is Rand Refinery integrating ESG principles into its operations? What kind of measurable impact have these initiatives had that you guys have seen? I think Terence is frozen from my side. So while we wait for him to come back, Sheena, can I jump to you, and then we'll come back to Terence. From Standard Bank's side, you guys are doing really nice work around the Sustainability Academy. Would love to hear more about how the Academy aims to bridge that sustainability knowledge gap among African businesses, particularly SMMEs. Would love to hear more about that work, please.
Thanks, Mark. So we actually began the journey of... Sorry, is someone saying something? Okay.
No, you're good. Go for it.
We began the journey of the Sustainability Academy coming off various conversations that we had with our clients, where they saw that we as a financial institute were actually putting measures in place to make sure that our own operations were sustainable. And coming off those discussions, they had said to us, we would love to understand how to actually implement this within our own operations. But if you think about the corporate client, they have access to resources and expertise, and they can bring in a consultant and tell them to exactly do something sustainable for their businesses. Whereas the story is a little bit different for the SME. They usually operate with tighter budgets and limited access to sustainability, which makes that implementation piece a lot more difficult for them to implement. And that's where the Academy was birthed from, is for us to actually provide SMEs with a free service where they can understand key principles around sustainability and how to implement it within their own operations, how to ensure that sustainability is a key part of their strategies going forward. If you've done something for a particular way for as long as you've known, there's no reason to change it. But once that awareness is out there on actually doing things in a more sustainable manner, people can actually make sure that their business decisions are based on sustainable practices going forward. So that's what we're trying to achieve through the Academy. And we recently launched it at the end of August, and we're currently sitting on about 500 users across Africa right now, which we entail on scaling throughout Africa to make sure that everybody gets this awareness, which they would have paid quite a large amount of money necessarily to get this information, but we're providing it upfront. I know as a financial institute, everybody always looks at us as wanting to clock the economic piece, but we would like to show that we are fully committed to all of the pillars across ESG as well.
Great, fantastic, Sheena. And I see that link's also gone up in the chat. So if anyone wants to read more about that, please jump in there.
Sorry, Mark?
Julie, please go for it. Yeah.
So, before we go off this one, so I think it's really great what I've heard from both Werner and Sheena now. And I just want to, first of all, say that everything that the NCPC specifically, but also there's other state entities like SANEDI in terms of energy, there's the CSIR, there's actually a lot of free resources. And so I'm going to definitely make sure I connect with the Standard Bank Academy afterwards so that you guys can make use of links to our resources. But I think people underestimate the amount of information there is out there. And so if there are companies who don't really know where to start, the Standard Bank thing sounds fantastic. We've got a website full of free resources. And, sort of, I just like to echo what Sheena said, is that they think that maybe some of this will cost a lot of money. There's actually quite a lot companies can do before it costs them money. It might cost them a bit of time, but there is quite a bit they can do in every area of the E, the S, and the G. And that's just, I'll also put our website, or we'll put our website in as the chat as well. There's a lot of free resources out there that are available to companies.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. I think that's a lovely point. And please do put your link in the chat. And for attendees as well, if you are aware of other freely available content and useful links, please feel free to add them. I think that's a lovely point. There's so much work that has been done in the space. So often you don't need to reinvent things. Often someone has led the way. Terence, I see you are back. Great to have you. Just before you dropped off, I was going to ask how integrating ESG principles is happening within the Rand refinery space. What kind of impact have you seen from the initiatives that you've been running with so far?
Thank you, Mark, for the good question, and good afternoon to the listeners, and apologies for the being cut off. I think from our side, our ESG journey at Rand Refinery is anchored in relevance, rigor, and accountability. We started with a materiality assessment that aligns what matters the most with our global ESG standard and looking at the UN Sustainable Developmental Goals. Thereafter, we identified goal number 8, that look at decent work and economic growth as our anchor. That has been paired with our vision to become the most responsible, resilient, and respected refiner. From thereafter, we did the double materiality assessment, whereby responsible procurement practices came as a leading theme for long-term value creation. Thereafter, we started to look at the environmental front, whereby we set aside over 75 million to install a 4.5 megawatt solar farm, also with energy efficiency technologies. That has led to an electricity cut of about 24% within the space of 3 years, leading to a reduction in emission of 8.5 kilotons of CO2 equivalent. And we are forecasting that number will grow to be as high as 13.5 kilotons of CO2 equivalent. Currently, our refinery is 80% powered by what we call is an African sun, whereby by 2027, it will be 100% powered by renewables. We're excited to reach that milestone. Water has also been cut down by 23% from our baseline, with projects underway to reach zero effluent and reduce consumption on already strained water supply in the region, and that could benefit thousands of homes. Not to forget that by recycling our effluent, it also improves our resource recovery efficiency as well. Our company has also continued to look at biodiversity, whereby we're looking at the local lake to make sure that it remains pollution-free. And we also partnered with the local authority to donate about 400 to 500 trees, which are indigenous trees, to local schools. Socially, when you look at people's side, we are proud to share that since we looked at Sustainable Developmental Goal number 4, looking at education, how to impact that, we are proud to share that we are about 3.5 years LTI free. So as a company, we've not had an LTI in 3.5 years, and we've also implemented a wellness strategy that supports our employees, contractors, and families. We've also channeled about 41.4 million in education programs, changed infrastructure of 6 local schools, donated stationary ICT equipment, STEM libraries, and offered tutoring of those subjects by utilizing or employing unemployed graduates to go and give that knowledge. We also sponsored bursaries, artisans, and many more other initiatives that can be seen in our sustainability report that is on our website. Supporting the women agenda is that 50% of our bursary recipients are supporting women, and over 50% of new joiners in our organization are female. And we're also proud that they've got a 100% return rate post-maternity. I hope we're a good company to work for to realize this stat. So we've also supported the local jewelers to make sure that we upgrade their facilities, offer interest-free loans, and we've also made metal available and also make sure that we provide route to market so that they can sell some of their products. With regards to local spend, over the last 3 years, we spent 1.5 billion, and we're also helping young entrepreneurs who are challenged that when they submit an invoice, we do what you call it's an early settlement so that they can provide resilience into their business. They don't have to wait for the 30-day turnaround. With regards to governance, 100% of our gold and silver intake at Rand Refinery is responsibly sourced. We're embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging with all our employees to make sure that they are fully conversant with the topic by 2026. We are also actively supporting anti-GBV initiatives, and we're also strengthening resilience with training in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. So in summary, Rand Refinery is setting the standard for what is responsible refining should look like, balancing profitability with purpose, compliance with compassion, tradition with transformation. By embedding these ESG principles in every aspect of our operation, we're not only protecting the planet and uplifting people, but also providing that African companies can lead globally with integrity, innovation, and impact. Thank you, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Terence. A nice, thorough overview of all of the work you guys are doing, and really nice to see things in the E, the S, and the G. Nice to link back to some of those operational improvements and financial imperatives for doing some of these things as well. So really nice to cover all of that. For Werner, thank you. I see you answered one of the questions in the chat. I'm just going to come to the Q&A. In the Q&A for a question. Sandhisha, one for you. The generation of green hydrogen will obviously impact the carbon footprint in South Africa. How is the technology progressing as well as some of the projects?
That's a really good question, and also just sort of a new technology being introduced in the South African market right now, with developers also trying to understand the permitting factors around green hydrogen. So like any green sort of technology, it would have to sort of assess what your impacts are and what derivatives would be. And I think we're still in that process of understanding exactly what that means. So it's a learning in progress.
Thanks, Sandhisha. Any other panelists want to add on to that response?
I can possibly add a little bit. So the United Nations and some of the other international funding partners like GIZ have actually, sorry, I just leaned forward because I realized I just dropped something. I realized I leaned forward, my camera's on. Apologies. A couple of those international partners have got projects that have either just started or are launching soon. Here at the NCPC, together with the CSR Energy Center, we will soon be involved in a project which is specifically set up to look at green hydrogen with industrial spaces, SEZs, industrial parks. So CSR's Energy Center has published a lot of information on the opportunities, the pitfalls, and I know GIZ is a big proponent of it. So for the panel, for the audience member who is interested in this, I would suggest that you possibly go and have a look and see if GIZ is still running their training. They have some very heavily subsidized training that they do. So GIZ, for those who aren't familiar, is the German Development Agency. I'm not going to try and say it in German. And the NCPC will possibly have a training component that we will be launching in the next year or so. And we'll definitely advertise that. We frequently advertise our training on the Creamer Media platforms. But the website that I shared earlier is there. So there's a lot of movement, but not a significant sort of milestone that we can say we've arrived. But like most R&D, this takes time. Innovation takes time. Hope that helps.
Perfect. Thank you, Julie, and thanks, Sandhisha. Vanna, thank you. You are plowing through the questions directed at you. Terence, there's one for you as well in the chat that you can feel free to answer in the Q&A. And lots of others coming through. So we will hopefully have time to come back to all of those. I'm going to move now, actually, it's a nice segue into the specific role of technology and innovative products in achieving ESG goals. And Fiona, we'll come to you now. You guys have done a lot of work on water specifically. What kind of technologies or tools are enabling companies to better understand upstream and downstream water dynamics and manage their impacts more responsibly?
Hello, everyone. Great question there, Mark. There are quite a few technologies out there with regards to frameworks and tools and the AI area. SRK, we focus more on the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard, the AWS standard, as this is a globally recognized framework that guides companies through site and catchment level water stewardship actions. We all know that good water stewardship practices can be driven through the application of this AWS standard, as it provides the tools for transparent collaboration with others to implement sustainable water management practices across the wider water catchment. The AWS standard is there to guide organizations through a logical process to enable them to capture and create responses based on the data that they gather. And through them, they create continual improvement on their water management practices. Through the development of a water stewardship plan, they have actions and targets. These targets can be compiled by using the Science-Based Target Network. This is a nature-based target, and it looks at water quality and water quantity, as well as the biodiversity and land degradation. Included in part of the plan would be to have a track and report back on it. So you track to see how your actions are proceeding and are you achieving your targets. Other useful tools that we have utilized are the water risk assessment tools, which help companies evaluate their water-related risks across their operations, their supply chains, and their catchments. The World Wildlife Fund, the WWF Water Risk Filter, this is a good one that helps companies and investors identify and assess their risks across their operations, their supply chains, and their catchments. By looking at those, you will identify your potential up and downstream impacts that people can impact you, as well as how you can impact on others. The Water Resources Institute Aqueduct, the WRI Aqueduct, is also a great tool. It is a peer-reviewed data to map and analyze water risks such as floods, droughts, water stress, and water quality. And all of these tools, they support the decision-making for sustainable water management, especially needed in this face of climate change, population growth, and as well as economic development. There are many other tools and frameworks out there. There are specifics to specific industries. This is where I've just touched on a few, and a lot of these can actually talk to the ESG requirements that a lot of companies now have to report on. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Fiona, and lovely to hear that view and get the sense from a water side. Julie, we'll come back to you actually here. What role have you guys seen from a technology perspective and helping business achieve ESG outcomes? And in particular, some examples from reducing energy use, waste, and emissions would be great.
Sure. Okay, so have I unmuted now? No, I didn't.
Yes, you are. You can go for it.
I thought it was going to be me who did that. Wow, we could have a webinar just on this, and we would be busy all afternoon, and we still wouldn't even scratch the surface, because technology It's a very broad term, but it's a game changer for most industries when it comes to improving environmental performance. So we have energy efficient equipment. Most equipment that you buy today, if you're going to spend capex, you're going to replace some of your equipment, it's already more energy efficient than the equipment that you are replacing it with. So that's a quick start. Cleaner fuels. Someone touched earlier on green hydrogen. It doesn't even have to be that big. Industrial companies for example, in the food production area are generating vast amounts of energy with their biomass. I had an interview recently with the biggest sugar manufacturer in the country, and they are now making more money, or more of their income, sustainable income, is coming from selling electricity than selling sugar, because of course none of us are eating sugar anymore. So biofuels and using the waste to energy concepts, those are massive at a company level. I'm not talking necessarily at a national grid level. We're talking here about ESG. So we're talking here about what companies can do. If you have waste that you can turn into some of that electricity. If you're looking at the ESG elements that don't maybe save you a huge amount of money, then you're looking more at water, for example. Water is still pretty cheap in South Africa. We have come a long way in the last decade. Massive strides have been made in terms of water reticulation, filtration technology, and it's not as expensive as it used to be. A couple of the countries that we partner with in the cleaner production centers around the world have actually led in that area. The Danish, for example, they've got a lot of technology that they've been bringing into South Africa and piloting in different companies. I know the Department of Water and Sanitation is working with them to get these technologies in. Then, of course, there's the metering. And that is probably where I would say I would pause there and say that is possibly the best use of technology. Not only in the metering in terms of like smart metering of your energy. Someone was saying it was Redefine. No, Growth Point. It was Growth Point. It was the guys from Growth Point. They were saying earlier that they don't know how much of electricity is coming from renewable versus off the grid. Sub-metering can vastly improve your not just your reporting quality and the ESG reports, but it also helps you identify very quickly, almost in real time, where you've got leaks and those kinds of things. And we don't have time to go into those technologies now, but really the smart metering is a big thing. And then the best way to use technology in the ESG, that's what we're talking about here. It's not just in terms of cleaner production. Across the board on ESG is the technologies of actually reporting. There are so many enabled and smart sort of technology platforms that will help you to report. So even if you're not a big manufacturing plant or a massive organization where you're monitoring and metering your energy, if you can invest in a license fee, the technology that we have, and I'm talking obviously internet technology now, that we have to help us to quantify our environmental or our social or our governance footprint it's changing every year. So really, like I say, entire webinar on this subject could be held, but technology is a massive contributor. And then that's not even touching on all the future-focused technology that all the smart scientists here at the CSR and other places are working on. So yeah, we don't have all afternoon, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Julie. And I'm going to come to you in a bit, Sandhisha, but just to say there's some nice examples going up in the chat as well. So please feel free to add in. Terence, great. I actually see, let me come to you and then Sandhisha will come to you after Terence.
Thank you. Just to concur with what Julie just shared, you don't need a lot, as she said. I concur with that in terms of investment, because since we started to put meters for electricity and even water, it helps with the root cause analysis to figure out what is the problem. So for us, after installing that, we could see which areas were consuming a lot of water, and then we tend to focus on that. And it helped us to pick up any leaks that were not easily detectable and even reroute some of our water to make sure that we prevent any leakages, because we see from streets when the water is leaking, it takes long to respond. So by having those meters, it enabled that fast response. As well as electricity, it also helped us to change our patterns in terms of starting equipment and leaving it idling. So if you have got good monitors, it helps you to use energy sparingly. So I definitely agree that having monitors, it helps in decision making.
Thanks, Terence. Yeah, some nice practical examples there of how this can play out in real time in a company. Thank you. Sandhisha, coming to you, what technologies are you seeing that are proving effective in ensuring that renewable projects deliver not only the clean energy part, but also the social and economic value, and particularly for communities?
I think, yeah, definitely a lot coming out of our social economic development projects from a renewable energy perspective. One project that is front of mind here at Pele is our Tourist Riviera hydroponic farm, which was the SAD development from our SPV1 project. And basically that has now spearheaded into sort of a fully fledged sort of hydroponic farm that is allowed for upskilling of the community in that area, as well as transferring into food security. So we've transversed from, energy into food security with our diverse approach in terms of social upliftment.
Super, thanks. Yeah, nice kind of tangible example there. Van, I'm going to come back to you for, you did a brief intro to, I pronounced it ECO2, but I heard you pronounce it as Eco2. Would love to hear more about the wheeling product and how it works and why you guys see it as so important.
Thanks, Mark. Just to answer to Julie's comment, thanks for pointing out the importance of, sub-metering. We have sub-meters on every tenant and solar plants. I think the example that I made was the tenant consumes 100 kilowatt hours and the solar is measured 20 kilowatt hours and the council is measured at 80. The tenant doesn't know if the 100 is from solar or council. You just see 100 kilowatt hours. So that's maybe just clarifying that comment. But I think, with the Eco2, we're very excited. We grow as Growthpoint, we have just shy of 62 megawatts peak of solar installed on our rooftops. It's more than 80 projects. We have a national operating center that's fully integrated into one software package that manages all these solar plants. And utilizing that as a base with our PPA is now to assist our tenants to reduce carbon emissions. So our Eco2 product is actually utilizing all the buzzwords of tech at the moment. So we utilize IoT with smart meters at all our solar plants, tenants, as well as our bulk meters. We have smart meters at all our big generators that will come online. Part of the power purchase agreement of our first generator that will come online in October is Boston Hydro, which is in the Lesotho Islands water scheme, which was newly developed. And we have exclusive rights to that power that comes online now in the next month or so. And then, so what happens actually is that, that data goes to a database. We then utilize AI to check if the data validity, to check any anomalies. We then take that data and push it into the international registry, the IREC registry, which is situated in the UK. So all of that is automated. And then we actually utilize a blockchain technology that timestamps the renewable energy certificate. So for people that doesn't know, one REC is actually 1 megawatt hours of electricity. So we timestamp that REC. So we know exactly when it was generated, where it was generated. And that flows into the blockchain for the whole duration up to the point where that REC is redeemed by either tenant or Growthpoint. So it's all the trades, everything that happens. So there's no double counting. There's nothing that, it's fully transparent. And then at the end, that goes to the international registry. It goes into a Growthpoint wallet, and then we have the option then to transfer that REC to our tenants. So what then happens is that REC number, or the REC's number, actually then is stipulated on a tenant's invoice every single month. And they know exactly how many RECs they have if they opted in for the Eco2 solution. So then what it actually does is that for the larger tenants, like, for example, a lot of the financial institutions, which is very concerned around sustainability reporting, they can then, they have access to their own account, which we find an innovative way to reduce the cost to negligible. And then they can have an option. They can either push the redeem button and they then get a formalized certificate that flows through into the international registry, take it out of the system in circulation, and they then can use that as part of their carbon disclosure program to reduce their Scope 2 emissions. And Scope 2 emissions is our biggest emissions category that we are of concern. For smaller tenants, they might not be as interested in renewable energy certificates or sustainability reporting. What they can do is they can push a button to trade. Then they sell those RECs to another company that might be interested to acquire those credentials, and then they can utilize and redeem it to their fit. So we're trying to accommodate both larger blue chip tenants that will drive the sustainability reporting initiative more than the smaller ones, but we're also trying to create some reward program for the smaller tenants to adopt this practice. So our main focus is to educate the industry, in essence, of this dilemma, that without the landlord's assistance, the tenants would never be able to drive the net zero strategy because they're dependent on the landlord. And that's why we're developing this tech and put it out there.
Ben, a quick follow-up. I mean, it sounds amazing, and I'm sure we'll get some more questions on it. But also sounds like a lot of work. How long roughly did it take you guys to pull all of it together?
So Mark, the power purchase agreement actually took us 18 months to negotiate. So that is quite an intense process. Then I think the rest of the tech also probably 18 months from November 23 up until now, 18 to 24 months. So yeah, everything is now ready to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, a really, really nice example. Thanks, Shannon. I saw your note that we will end at 3:30, so we've got a bit more space. We're actually going to move now to challenges and working out ways to foster collaboration. Thanks to my panelists who have been answering the questions in the Q&A in text. Sheena, there's one there for you. Terence, there's one there for you. And there are quite a few general ones. So if you feel like you have an answer for my panelists to any of those, please feel free to type an answer. Otherwise, we will come back to some of those questions a bit later. Okay, so when we're looking at some of these practical challenges, if you're an organization, you're wanting to implement ESG-aligned projects, you realize that you need to collaborate in order to do this in a lot of instances. Let's come back to that water example. Fiona, for you guys, with your nice view of this water landscape, how does water stewardship as part of ESG commitments help companies move beyond that sort of site level water management to embrace a broader catchment-based approach? And what kind of role does partnership play in that process?
Mark, that's a very good question. Recognizing that water is a shared responsibility fundamentally shifts how stakeholders will engage with water management. By doing this, it fosters a collaboration, an inclusivity, and a sustainability in the decision-making. It allows for a company or a site to better understand the catchment context and the stakeholder perceptions, and this leads to a more informed internal decision-making process. Basically, the catchment would be the setting for the water stewardship, whereas the stakeholder engagement is the mechanism for making those connections. When a stakeholder acknowledges that water is a finite and shared resource, it fosters a mutual respect for each other's needs, where you're talking your agriculture versus your industry, your communities and your ecosystems. So the collective vision allows for sustainable use and protection of that water resource, which often leads to a greater transparency in how that water is allocated and used. And by recognizing that it is a shared responsibility, it leads to inclusive decision-making, the process that involves all relevant stakeholders, be they farmers, the communities, your government, your industries, NGOs. It's where the local knowledge, the local integration improves the relevance and the acceptance of those decisions that are made. And it allows for a greater building of trust. And this is quite essential for the long-term cooperation. The collaborative approaches allow for flexible responses. The change to our conditions with climate change, it allows flexibility to adapt by understanding the area and seeing it through other people's eyes and not just you as the industry's eyes. It allows for a joint monitoring and data sharing. This will foster greater quality in the decision making because there's more knowledge that is spread throughout all those participants in that catchment. And it enables co-investment in things like infrastructure and conservation, so shared boreholes, catchment restorations. But the main reason for stakeholder identification and engagement is to support planning for water stewardship actions for the catchment. It's a process that should allow for the interest of stakeholders and the natural environment, as well as the companies that occupy that particular area. So in summary, stakeholders need to recognize that water is a shared resource whose management is a shared responsibility, and this will manage the risk more effectively.
Thanks, Fiona. And a very quick follow-up. Do you find, is it a tougher sell for private sector companies when water is kind of, in a way, one step removed? So for a manufacturing company, or if you're in the textiles industry, or mining, anything like that, you're going to be using a lot of water. But if you're a professional services firm, you don't have that immediate reliance, although people might understand, obviously, the foundational reliance. I'm curious about if that has been a challenge for you with firms that aren't kind of directly large water users or don't have that direct dependency, but do have that foundational dependency. And how have you managed that?
Yes, it is a difficult one because often your company will go, well, I don't use a lot of water. I'm not really going to impact on the area. But the fundamental of it is the stakeholder engagement. It's engaging. So just because you're not a big water user, you can help be a facilitator and help people to talk and join those areas that need to actually be chatting to each other. And it helps that understanding. If everybody comes to the party, you all understand everybody's different impacts that they have by either you or on you. And just because you're a small player doesn't mean to say you should ignore what's going on. But yes, it is very difficult when companies go, well, I'm not really a big player. I only use a small amount of water. How am I meant to improve the situation? But you can improve the situation by contributing and helping facilities, put in a borehole for a community, understand that they need the cleaner water, even though you're not a big water user, allow them to have drinking water where possibly they might not have that access.
Great.
So it's not always about oneself.
Great. I like that response a lot, and some nice guidance for those firms that aren't big water users but still want to play an active role from a water stewardship perspective. Thank you. Terence, I'm going to come to you now. When you are thinking about implementation of responsible sourcing, working on supply chain transparency, have you found some particular challenges that do come up more frequently than others?
Thank you, Mark. I think, yes, we do. I think we have sort of like summarized some of these before, which are interrelated challenges. The first one is to go into conflict-affected high-risk areas. With this one, we notice that in terms of weak governance, that often coincides with human resource violations illicit financing, and environmental harm. To address these, there are industry standards, like, for example, the 5-step of OECD that gives guidance on how to source in those. We're an LPMA refiner, where there's responsible gold guidance and silver guidance that advises refiners on how to navigate those terrain, and it gives a risk mitigation, what to do in case if you face other things. There's an option of engaging if issues come, and there's an option of walking away if it's too risky, or to continue to do business. And also with these, we also look at the mining principles that what the response WGC has published. So all those, when you look, we looked at it as when we engage, they are subject to be third-party audits that are also requiring high cost. There's a capacity demand, which could also be an issue that needs to be invested on. The second one is traceability. One thing I can share, that gold can be traceable from whatever region it's sourced. It carries a certain fingerprint. At Rand Refinery, we've been fortunate that we've been in existence for 100 years. So we've noted through chemical fingerprinting where the sources of gold coming from. And that is what we sort of like advocate in some of the products we put into the market. For an example, we've got a product that we recently launched called Rand Pure, where it encourages ethical sourcing and ESG initiatives, that anyone who buys mine gold can be easily tracked to that. And also with the tools of tracking, that when people buy, are they buying real gold or fake gold? So the chemical composition and whether to confirm in terms of packaging that the gold has not shifted. So those are important as well, to look into the market, that when people buy, they buy the genuine product. The third one is regulation. We all know that many countries change regulation to do resource protectionism. So that practice needs to be navigated and looked into context. And the last one is exposure to attract illicit gold or gold that is not responsibly sourced. That one can be very tricky for a refiner that is promoting responsible sourcing practices, because it can cease to exist. Over the years, I have seen refineries that when they take illicit sources, when they are found, it can lead to reputational losses. So reputation in the field of precious metal is important, and the bullion banks or any other stakeholders would like to know that whatever gold that has been taken is responsibly sourced, or is it contributing effectively to the community where it's originating from. And those people that are involved, are they the right people being involved in the sector?
Okay, great. You're touching on some really useful and powerful points here, Terence. Thank you. Sandhisha, I'm going to come to you back to the kind of renewables project space. From your experience, what are the biggest barriers to advancing ESG-aligned renewable projects from what you've seen, and how can they be overcome?
Yeah, I think anybody who's worked with me knows that my pet peeve is this tick box approach mentality, and I think largely ESG is sort of driven in that way, where we look at just what are the lender requirements and how can we satisfy them as fast and as quickly as we can, without really understanding fully what the repercussions are through the various different phases of the project. And I think what this kind of leads to is very superficial sort of reporting and monitoring, and we're not really deep diving into performance and impact driven mentality. And the key to sort of successful ESG is to really look at what trends are coming out of your monitoring, for example, and whether it be waste monitoring or your health and safety statistics, what are those trends and how are we actually adapting our policies and procedures and our processes to curb any sort of negative impact that might come to fruition. So it's adaptability as well. I think also core to this is having the necessary sort of expertise within the organization to drive through these policies and procedures and systems. I think ESG is looked at a very silo sort of division or portfolio. And companies really need to think of ESG as transversing various different business units in the organization. It's not just one division that is now responsible for everything, but rather a collective thought process. So yeah, I think that would, for me, would be one of the key barriers of the silo mentality of ESG.
Great. I like that a lot, Sandhisha. And I think, you've got this sort of internal silo mentality that you mentioned, and ESG is something that impacts the whole organization. But of course, organization operates within a broader societal context as well. And so the greater the fluency and communication and interaction across all those levels, I think the more impact ultimately, which is what we're after. So actually, great, thanks. So let's move there actually. I'd like to discuss how ESG initiatives can contribute in that bigger picture. So to larger societal goals, things like just transition, long-term sustainability. We've touched on a few examples of this throughout the conversation, but we want to come back to all six actually of the panelists and just get your views on this. So Werner, from your perspective, let's start with you. So you spoke through the Eco2 product. How can products like that accelerate corporate adoption of renewable energy, but also support these larger national energy security strategies?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think one of the key things that we're trying to advocate and educate is the sustainability reporting and the importance thereof. If you can measure what you actually consume and the amount of emissions that you produce, then you can find strategies to work towards to reduce that. So I think it's regularly noted that the building environment is more than 40% of all emissions. And so we have, as Growthpoint, have a big responsibility, not just to our company, but also to the society in South Africa, and also with our international exposure in other countries to find initiatives and assist our tenants to drive their carbon neutral or net zero strategies. And I think, if we educate that and we provide them tools and methods that they can reduce their carbon emissions, then eventually, that will be front of mind and they will also action on their own strategies going forward. So eventually how that will lead into the South African landscape, I think, what you will see in the next 3 to 5 years is you will see a lot more real estate investment trusts listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange will start to sign power purchase agreements. So Growthpoint was just the first. You will see several of them, going into the market. And what then happens is that, these secured private off-takers that in essence provides the security for new renewable projects to be constructed in South Africa.
Yeah, thanks, Werner. I think really, really interesting. I wonder, Sandhisha, did that trigger any thoughts from your side based on your experience?
Yeah, I mean, definitely can relate. And then, to my earlier point in terms of having measurable impact. So definitely having metrics in your reporting structure that are achievable in terms of an Afrocentric approach rather than just this targeted number that's in a framework somewhere that doesn't translate down to the local context. So really just looking and understanding what the metrics and targets are and retrofitting this to your playing field in terms of where your projects are.
Very nice. Thank you. Yeah, lovely addition. Fiona, I'm going to come to you because it occurs to me that there might be some parallels when we think about adopting that kind of holistic water stewardship strategy. So how can you see that contributing to balancing things around social equity, environmental sustainability, economic resilience within these ESG frameworks?
So water stewardship, it's a powerful connector across all 3 pillars of ESG, because in essence, water touches everything from ecosystems to equity to ethics. Water stewardship, smart business. It helps companies future-proof their operation, meet investor expectations, and contribute meaningfully to the global sustainability goals. Water stewardship directly supports environmental sustainability. It fosters reduction in water consumption through using efficient technologies and practices, prevention of pollution. Look at your water quality, make sure your wastewater treatment works are working correctly. The preservation of ecosystems, maintaining healthy watersheds and biodiversity, as well as mitigating climate risks like droughts and floods through resilient water strategies. Through the social part, you're ensuring equity and community well-being by ensuring equity to equitable accessibility to water for everyone. You're engaging your stakeholders. You're including the indigenous groups, farmers, local communities, as well as improving public health by safeguarding the water quality. Through governments, you are driving accountability and transparency. You're setting yourself clear water policy and targets that should be aligning with your ESG frameworks. You've got monitoring and reporting on your water uses, your water risks, your water impacts, and also complying with regulation, not just country regulation, if one can, and comply with international regulation. And then it's the disclosure performance. It fosters transparency, and it allows for investors to better understand, as well as stakeholders to better understand you. Water stewardship, as I said earlier, it is smart business.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Yeah, really compelling argument put forward. Thank you. We're going to jump sectors again. So, Terence, coming back to you in the refining sector, you've given us a lot of examples and color about the work that you guys have been doing in this space. I'd like you to focus just around that just transition element and how the refining sector can contribute to a just transition in emerging markets. I would love to get your views on that.
Thank you, Mark. The refining sector has got a pivotal role in enabling the just transition to ensure that economic development does not come at the expense of people or the planet. I hope, as you said, we have demonstrated this through dual focus on sustainable production and shared socio-economic value creation. Just like as some of the panelists have shared earlier, the decarbonization is very important. I think we have seen the devastation that could happen if that agenda is not elevated and made real, so that we can focus at other sources and minimize the impacts of having other emissions to the atmosphere. Investment in eco-designs, water conservation, waste minimization, because one thing somebody shared earlier about circular economy, we saw that some of these minerals can be recovered through circular economy. It can open up a new market and share resources for the future generation, environmental stewardship. So these are some of those things that we can look at. In terms of the inclusive growth, the one thing that we've seen, that if we refiners can support local economic development through enterprise incubation, like jewelry manufacturing, mentorship schemes, making sure that metals is available, especially for those communities where the resources are, it will promote employment, especially in our country as well, that maybe can encourage entrepreneurship spirit. And then with regards to the topic that is emerging, especially for the African continent, that the gold refiners are looking at, is around artisanal scale gold mining, what is known as ASM or ASGM. It's a topic that previously was avoided, and Africa bled a lot of gold within that space. Now it's a topic that must be looked at thorough to make sure how do we move from this sector that was viewed in bad light to be brought into the formal market, but without losing some of the lessons that have been learned by the formal sector, like in making sure that there's no harm to environment, there's no human violation. So those good practices can be brought in, and all those technological lessons around traceability and knowledge can be brought into that sector. I believe that if that can be done, it can help to alleviate some of the losses that the continent face, or even our country, and promote for better economic growth.
Yeah, thanks, Terence. And I like how you interweave a lot of the societal elements into that. I'm going to just pull on that thread a little bit with you, Julie. If we look at the design of projects, corporate strategies, how do we make sure that these societal elements of ESG are built in practically into these business operations?
Yeah, thanks. So it boils down to what we measure. So, for example, if you don't put gender equity as one of the metrics into the measurement of the success of your project, you won't be able to report on it. And at the NCPC, CSR, and other sort of research and science-based organizations, we operate a lot on projects. So as opposed to the corporate environment, obviously there's a lot of corporate strategies. So on a project level, let me address that one first. You identify those elements that you want to ensure get kept top of mind. And I'm going to stick with the gender equity example. So if you design a project which is aimed at renewable energy, or you design a project that's aimed at green chemistry or industrial parks or whatever it is, you can include an element around gender equity in there and sort of think, well, how do you do that? And when you, for example, are identifying expressions of interests or requests for proposals, when you're doing training, when you're doing awareness raising, if you don't put gender equality as one of the and someone mentioned a tick box. This is not just a tick box. If you don't put it as a list of one of the boxes that people do need to check when they've identified whether they've in fact touched on all the important metrics, then you're not going to bother. So what you do is you take a baseline when you're starting a project. What does it look like now? What is the representation of for example, the woman representation at an industrial park where we're working? What does it look like when we start? Then we put gender as one of the metrics that we're going to measure, and we encourage participation by women by various campaigns. And at the end, you can then see whether you have in fact shifted that needle. On a corporate level, those same principles apply. We talked earlier in my first question about putting environmental metrics into performance agreements. If your executives, as they do with triple BEE, they have triple BEE in their performance. The CEO of the CSR, for example, doesn't meet his performance targets if the CSR is not a certain level of triple BEE status. And it's the same with these other societal elements, gender, youth, with the list goes on. I mean, we're South African. We know about the many needs. So the idea is put it in your targets, do a baseline, and then put metrics in place that you can monitor how you perform against that baseline, whether you're a corporate or whether it's a project that you're designing. And then the last thing is to communicate those. Communicate it to the project team or to the corporate staff right at the beginning. No matter how bad the baseline is, communicate that, and then communicate regularly how you're doing against those targets, exactly the same way you would with water or energy or carbon. You do it with your social elements as well. Hope that helps.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, some really nice guidance there. Sheena, I'm going to give the last word on broad impact to you. You've introduced the Sustainability Academy initiative. Curious how this is thought of in the bank. So how does this align with Standard Bank's broader mission to support sustainable economic growth in Africa?
Thanks, Mark. Sustainability is a core strategic pillar for Standard Bank. We're trying to incorporate ESG into everything that we do. And we know that progress against sustainable targets cannot be done in isolation, which is why we've partnered with Microsoft to put this platform together. That allows us a platform that is scalable across African regions where we operate. And then we also want to cover topics like, what are those ESG principles? And I hear speaking a lot about these lovely things, but to the ordinary small-scale farmer, a lot of these things seem very cryptic. And the Academy actually aims to bridge that gap for people to understand what do these principles mean when we're saying ESG, what are these pillars standing for. We're also touching on renewable energy options in climate smart agriculture, water and wastewater management. I actually seen in the chat someone mentioned the fusion water treatments, and the fusion Muscam Water is actually partnered with us on creating our water content. So that's very much been a big piece for us as well, because we know that we are in a continent that is experiencing a water crisis. The same with our renewable energy component. Load shedding is not just something that is an SA-based issue, but something that we find across Africa. So as much as the topics cut across all sectors, we have taken it from a very holistic perspective to make sure that we are able to help business shape the future of embedding ESG principles into everything that they do. The Academy itself also provides you with a certificate of completion. You can contact us through your relationship manager if you are a client. But we've also launched this to the general public, so you do not have to be a Standard Bank client in order to access it. Absolutely anyone who has access to the internet, an email address and a cell phone number will be able to register on the platform. And then also some future plans for what we're trying to achieve here is actually based on those impact assessments, to partner with a company that will help people understand where they are at in their current journey of measuring the ESG criteria and give them a score against it, and then give them actionable items to actually implement to make sure that they get to a better rating, because we can see that the evolving landscape of sustainability is requiring us to take ESG considerations a lot more serious. It's requiring us to have those risk assessments in place. It's not just a nice to have, but it actually positions you as a better business when you have these certifications in place. So those are some of the things that will be coming down the line really soon. But absolutely, that matrix component is really important. It's not enough to just learn about these concepts, but to actually measure where your business is on the journey and how you can get to that best place in sustainability.
Great, lovely. Thanks, Sheena. That's a great way to wrap up the formal questions. We're going to go now to the Q&A. I'd encourage the panelists just to have a look. Some of these do look like they can be answered in text, and I see a couple of you are working on them. Thank you. But one that's been up since early on, one of the early questions from the webinar, let me read it out. And I think, Sandhisha, maybe I can ask you to take a first stab at this one. Greenfield's project to set up pure decarbonization ENV to synthesize clean and green ammonia, hydrogen, and hydronova with only renewable energy. So I guess that's the context. What are the best strategies to attract fully aligned investors with speed and purpose?
Yeah, I think I definitely touched on that in terms of my first answer, and it is tapping into that double materiality sort of impact of, are we do we have the right systems and strategies in place to attract those investors that are looking specifically into these technologies, and how are we showing impact to our surrounding environment. So I think that aligns with that double materiality sort of equation, and if you're able to tap into that, you would be able to definitely attract the necessary capital for this specific development process.
Great, thank you. Any other panelists want to jump in on that point? Great. Fiona, one directed at you. I've noticed a lot well drillers, around areas and or municipalities struggling with water supply and advertising their services to drill water for anyone. Is drilled water not monitored by municipalities? Should a permit be issued? And does this not pose a huge risk to our water aquifers in the long run?
That's a great question. Yeah. If it's for a Schedule 1 use, they would have to register the borehole with the Department of Water and Sanitation. If it's for industrial use, they should be getting a water use license. But yes, a lot of people are oblivious to the laws or turn a blind eye to the law and don't actually follow those processes. So DWS, the Department of Water Sanitation, they are our custodians of our water. So they should be advised of all of these things. But in a lot of cases, no, it's not. People want the water and they put it down. They get fed up of the water interruptions because of various reasons. And yeah, this does lead to possible strains on our water resources.
Great, thanks. So a definite challenge there. One more question, maybe this one, maybe Julie, I can ask you to take a first stab at this one. With sustainability increasingly emphasizing the monitoring and reporting of product production and consumption, I've noticed a significant gap in strategies for managing the end-of-life phase of products. For example, many products are commonly disposed of through burning, which significantly increases the carbon footprint. Additionally, careless disposal practices can severely harm our water systems. These are highlighting the urgent need for comprehensive end-of-life planning and responsible disposal approaches. What has been done to address this need? Sorry, a bit of a mouthful, but yeah, curious,
fine.
Julia, if you've got some views on that one.
Sure. Okay. I think this should be addressed from a three-pronged approach. First of all, we've got design. So all of these products, this is the responsibility, and this is where, you know, ESG really comes into play. It falls to responsibility of those designing and producing those products to bear that in mind when they're making it. The second then is to use. If you're a user, and this falls to companies as well as individuals, if you're a user of a product, surely it should fall to you to do a little bit of checks and balances before you dispose of something as to the right way to do it. The third is in terms of enforcement, and this is probably where that question is targeting, but we tend to rush straight to enforcement. What is DFFE doing? What is being done? And so I just urge the entire, you know, audience to consider those two first steps. First of all, design. Secondly, use. But when it does come to enforcement, we do have an issue with enforcement across the board in this country. We have to be honest about that. And in other countries, you drop a piece of litter and someone can arrest you. In this country, it's a national pastime almost. So really, in terms of enforcement, the Department of Forestry, Fishery and Environment, they are the custodians of those legal requirements. And there's a lot of work being done. There's a lot of legislation, a lot of talking, but really it comes down to enforcement is a bit difficult. So those first two elements may actually fall in the hands of the rest of us.
Great, thanks, Julie. Sandhisha, please go for it.
Yeah, I think I can also maybe add to that from a renewable energy perspective. As an industry, we are also looking at in use and decommissioning of plants. It is part of our sort of cradle to grave approach that we have to renewable energy. And in terms of enforcement, both from a lender perspective as well as a DFFE perspective, we are required to ensure that plans for decommissioning and budgeting for decommissioning is in place at the forefront of the project, not at the end. So this is definitely something that is being monitored and enforced from a authority level as well as a lender or investor perspective as well.
Great, thanks, Sandhisha. I think we've got time for one more from the Q&A. So let's give this a go. Open to anyone. It's a nice big one. South Africa relies heavily on coal for energy and has abundant reserves, yet there's growing pressure to transition to clean energy under ESG commitments. Is it realistic or fair to expect South Africa to stop using coal? And if so, what alternatives could balance ESG goals with energy security and economic needs? So maybe an unfair request to try and squeeze this into a couple of minutes. It's obviously a massive question. But yeah, it would be great. Sandhisha, you can kick us off, and then if anyone else wants to weigh in on this, please do. I know it's a big one.
No, sure. More just a statement. Essentially, it's not about stopping, coal. It's about an energy mix, right? A good energy mix in terms of our, in terms of electrifying South Africa. So it's not about solely transitioning from coal into renewables. I think a lot of countries across the world have a good energy mix, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks, Sandhisha. Julie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think I just want to make the point here that we have a buzzword at the moment called the just energy transition. And that's really what this question encapsulates, that the justness of our energy transition needs to be that we transition our energy, and we have been transitioning energy use for decades and centuries. We didn't always have coal mines. So we need to transition into the next phase in such a way that we show justice to our miners, to our communities, to our environment, to the unemployed, to the disenfranchised, to science, to technology, to everything. And that's the theory behind the just energy transition. It's not just a buzzword. It's the notion of changing the way we use energy so that nobody is left behind in a way. And that's not going to happen overnight. And we can even have another webinar just on coal reserves, because that was quite a statement that we have lots of coal reserves. That's debatable. So that transition has to happen, but it needs to happen in a way that is just and fair to every element of and sector of our society. That's the objective.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks, Sandhisha. Okay, great, guys. I'm going to go around the panelists just for final thoughts, something that stuck out from the discussion, a big takeaway for you, or something you really want to emphasize. Werner, can I start with you, and then I'll just move through everyone one by one, something to give the audience as we wrap up.
Thanks, Mark. I think, one comment that I will leave for the audience is that sustainability reporting is becoming as stringent as financial reporting in our world, in the listed world. And we need to actually find initiatives to assist ourselves and, the tenants and the customers that you work with to reduce and help their goals as well.
Okay, thanks, Werner. Sheena, can I come to you?
Sure, thanks, Mark. I think just as we wrap up this conversation, I'd like to reiterate that sustainability is no longer optional. It's something that's very much essential across every industry in which you operate in. You can hear the various elements that we're discussing right now about reporting and ensuring that it takes place. And you can see the importance from making sure that this is very much part of the way we do things going forward. It's not something that somebody else should do in a sustainability team somewhere, but it's something that every single one of us play a part in. So it doesn't matter where you work or what you do, even in our own personal lives, we can all contribute towards our greater sustainability goals. So let's bear that in mind as we move forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Sheena. Fiona, to you for final thoughts.
Often when you talk about sustainability, people often refer to your carbon. Carbon is very much a big focus of sustainability. And often water is the forgotten poorer brother as such. Water is fundamental in our lives. We need it. And it's honestly something that we need to start taking more focus on and putting it in the forefront. Carbon credit's easy. You can account for it a lot easier. Water's constantly changing. You need to understand your environment. You need to understand your water needs and those of others. It's something that should start become more of a focal point than the carbon credits.
Great, thank you, Fiona. Terence, to you.
Thank you, Mark. I think for me, when I look at sustainability, especially from the sector where we're at, the piece that comes to mind is around social, which is people. Ever since I started with this work, I started to see the impact that the mining sector does, especially across Africa, because we're a resource-endowed continent. So if we stop mining, I think it will affect their livelihood. So responsible mining and doing things correctly can benefit and uplift communities. The second one is around education. Of all the leading economies now, when I read their history, they are somehow related around education. So for me, I'm excited for the future generation, and with the mindsets that are here, that if we can plow back and invest more in education using whatever tools that are there, we can help to reframe Africa as a different story, rather than being a begging continent, to be a continent that teaches and gives more to the world.
Lovely. Thank you, Terence. Julie.
Yeah, I think everyone has said all the big picture stuff. Very much want to touch on what Sheena said earlier, is that this is everyone's responsibility, but sometimes we don't know where to start. So don't think of ESG as something that the big corporates do. Doesn't matter what size your company is, where you find yourself in the economic sectors, just take the first small step. And if you don't know where to start, you're welcome to go to our website. I can't say it'll fix it, but there's many, many online resources to help you to start. Just start tomorrow, this afternoon. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you, Julie. And last word to you, Sandhisha, before we hand back to Shannon.
I think for me, ESG is core to business, should be core to business strategy to unlock the necessary capital to continue to have that transformative impact. Short and sweet.
Thanks, Sandhisha, and thanks to all the panelists. Really great conversation. Shannon, can I hand back to you to close us out?
Thanks very much, Mark. That brings us to the end of today's discussion. A big thank you to our facilitator, Mark Robertson, and panelists Sandhisha Jay Narain from Pele Green Energy, Julie Wells from National Cleaner Production Centre, Fiona Sutton from SRK Consulting, Werner van Antwerpen from Growth Point Properties, Sheena Ramsamy from Standard Bank, and Terence Nkosi from Rand Refinery for sharing their insights. And to all of you for joining us and contributing through your questions and comments. We'd also like to once again thank our sponsors, SRK Consulting, Pele Green Energy, the CSIR's National Cleaner Production Centre of South Africa, Standard Bank, Harmony Gold, Growth Point Properties, and Rand Refinery for making this webinar possible. The recording of today's session will be made available shortly, so keep an eye out for that link. We hope you'll connect with us again for our next webinar on the 8th of October at 2 p.m. It will focus on tailing success stories and the benefits of well-managed land rehabilitation. The link to register for that event has been shared in the chat. And if you'd like to stay up to date with our upcoming webinars and news, be sure to sign up for our free daily newsletter or visit our website. You can also reach us at shannon@creamermedia.co.za. From all of us at Creamer Media Webinars, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.